Good morning, Composition 3, and welcome to our final class of this semester. Today, we really only have one object, and that is to describe how to study for the exam, to give you a few pointers about which sections in the textbook are important, and just to tell you its format in a little bit more detail. So, there are 3 sections on the exam, and I have the exam in my hand here. I have to be careful not to flash it to the video, not that you would be able to make it out. But the exam is composed of 3 parts, a Part A section, Part B section, and a Part C section. So before I tell you exactly what that means, I'm just going to go over the textbook and the things that we did this semester and the things that I emphasized. Now I know some of the essays have already been handed in and the last few are due today. Keep in mind that this week the final assignments for all 7 of my classes were handed in, and I have no teaching assistants or grading or research assistants of any kind. So there is about 160 assignments that I have to grade. And then next week we do exams and I have to grade 160 exams. So it's going to take a lot of time and effort for me to get through them and be very careful to grade them. So please be patient. Just because exams are over and you're done doesn't mean that I will be. So you're going to have to be patient in waiting for your final grades for your assignments. I'll do them as fast as I can, but I'll be processing a whole bunch of classes at once. And as I told you before, you are the Friday Composition 3 older group, so I rely on you to be a little bit more patient and reasonable. Okay, so we did, basically we did half of the textbook. A lot of the stuff in the textbook is useful right to the end. And but often I have to pick and choose which topics we focus on because, yeah, there's a lot of material to get through in 14 weeks. So we only made it to chapter 6, and there's certain things that are more relevant to the exam than others. So I'm going to point you to certain pages, and please listen carefully to the numbers. I'm not going to post this on the website. This is part of your this is part of being a good student, is taking notes and listening carefully to what your professor says in lecture. So the first thing that I want you to look over is on page 13, you had to read over some paragraphs and you had to make a judgment call about whether the paragraph was a good one or not. That in part B, that section is paragraph analysis. And so any section in the textbook, not just this one, but any section where I talked about paragraphs and I mentioned topic sentences, supporting sentences, concluding sentences, connections, right? Sentences that don't belong or they're illogical. All of those things that we talked about when we went through the entire semester, you have to remember those things. You have to be critical of writing and how effective the communication is and how it could be better. So as I told you right from the beginning, I'm not looking for you to really say, this is a perfect paragraph, or this paragraph is awful, it's the worst. I'm looking for you to break it down and say, this is a strong paragraph, but this is a weak point. Or this is a weak paragraph, and this is a strong point. It can be a variety of things. So you have to look at the different aspects. And right back at the beginning of the semester, and I think some of you have done a lot to improve these certain characteristics of your writing. Is be clear, concise, and coherent, right? So if there's a lot of sentences and a lot of repetitive language and the points don't seem to be adding much to the argument, then it can probably be reduced. And you can take some of that out. You can remove parts of sentences or entire sentences or rewrite it so that it's more efficient. And that's what being concise means. So you have to look at the paragraph. I don't really care what kind of vocabulary you use to critique the paragraph. You just have to say, well, this doesn't make sense. it's the same thing as saying this is illogical. You can't have these two things working together. This is the wrong transition. It should be this. These two things help each other. They're not working against each other. So if you look for these, these contradictions, illogical, statements, those are things to look for. Organization has to be good as well, right? It has to, the reader has to be able to see, well, this is what the person's talking about, and then one point follows the next one until you get to the end, and then the conclusion, matches the statement at the beginning. It's not in a totally different place when you get to the bottom. So that was the start of that kind of analysis. Page 13, that's when we started talking about that, and there's a lot of other pages that do the same thing, right? So let me just go to those other pages too. 17, we looked at a paragraph, about the Atlas Health Center, where you had to do some homework on that. And page 18, there was a short explanation paragraph and an example paragraph. They all have problems with them. They're all missing things. Especially on page 19 and 20, there were examples of paragraphs and they had problems. You had to identify the means of support and say, was there a concluding sentence or not? And then I wanted you to explain why the paragraph was a good one or not. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 examples there. And then the peer editing example on page 21 also goes through, the process of fixing things that, identifying problems and then recommending ways to fix them. And that's what you have to do in part B of the exam, is you have to look at the paragraph, and some of the questions involve, does this paragraph have good structure? Is there a topic sentence? Is it a strong paragraph or not? You have to answer those questions, and this is how you do it. The textbook is demonstrating. Similarly, on page 23, they gave you examples of strong topic sentences and weak ones. And since we did thesis statements, I want you to go even further. I want you to actually narrow the topic down, be very specific, make sure there's a position, right, that can be argued, and give a reason. You have to claim something. You have to make a position and then claim something about it. And then you have a thesis, right? And that's on page 15. That was where I asked you to take 3 of those topics and turn them into thesis statements. That was a homework assignment. Okay, so all those pages so far are important. I'll give them to you again. Page 13, page 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 23, and the paragraphs at the beginning of chapter 4, which are page 26. Like I said, any of the homework that you did, look it over again and look at the paragraphs that are in the textbook, but especially page 20 and 21. That's the kind of thing that we're looking at, right? There's the paragraphs on page 28 and 29. These are all examples which lack a certain thing. So remember, I said a lot of these things are just simply describing information, but what we did this semester, in the end, when you hand in your essay today, I'm looking for an argumentative essay. So you were developing your writing to a higher level than this. Most of this stuff is just descriptive or informative, and that's it. It's not looking for an argument. But what I was asking you to do is, I think an argumentative paper is harder to write, and I think it's more useful. And in a situation in your future, if you don't know how to do that, if you don't know how to construct a good argument, you're going to end up losing the argument. So it's good for you to develop this. Debating skills, critical thinking skills, essay skills are all related to each other. Okay? So just keep in mind the examples in the book are just single paragraphs, and they often don't have a strong argument. So they do not have the characteristics that I want you to notice, the things that I want you to include in your paragraph on the exam. Certainly the connectors is a general thing. That page on page 30, always useful, but not something that you specifically have to prepare for. The questions that are in part A are specifically going to deal with narrowing down topics and turning things into thesis statements and identifying fact and opinion. So page 34, where we're talking about what things are facts and what things are opinions, and page 36, where I gave a statement and then you had to agree or disagree and then argue against it, right? Argue for or against. And you had to write a short paragraph, multiple sentences. That's the kind of question that's going to be, you have to be able to argue and give a short answer and defend your argument, because that's a fundamental skill of essay writing. So don't ignore page 36 or page 34, because those are very important to the short answer section in part A, right? And the page I mentioned already, way back in page 15, where you take a topic sentence and the topics that I gave you at the bottom of your essay outline that you changed into thesis statements, all of those questions, that question will also appear on part A. So there'll be just a simple topic or statement, and the question will ask you to argue against it and provide good reasons for your position, or it'll say, take this topic and write me a thesis statement. Okay? You also should be able to distinguish between fact and opinion, and if I ask you to write a fact, you should be able to do that, and if I ask you to write an opinion about a topic, you should be able to do that too. And that's part A. Okay? And part B includes all the rest of the sections that are asking you to look at paragraphs and how to judge good paragraphs and what paragraphs require to be effective. If they have good structure, and if they're well connected, and they have strong statements, and if the support is good. Chapter 6 at the end there is the comparative and contrast style paragraphs, and as I pointed out to you, that's one of the last section of the essay, part C. You have a choice of 4 topics, and of those four topics, you get to choose one, and one of them is a comparison one. One of them is 2 things, and if you, from our Zoom lecture last week, if you thought, well, that's what I would like, if the 2 things that I've chosen are appealing to you, then just remember you have to write about one side and then the other side and make a judgment, right? Your statement should be, oh, these things are similar in this way but different in another, and so overall the advantage goes to this one. Or make some sort of judgment leaning one way or another. You can't just say they're similar but different, because that's not going to give anybody information they can use to make a decision. You should, at the beginning, decide that one has a distinctive advantage, and you can qualify it by saying its advantage is it's very cheap, but the other one is higher quality. However, it's so cheap that it makes it almost more reasonable to buy 2 of the cheap ones than one of the more expensive ones. So you have to make a judgment call when you're making a comparison between 2 things. But because when somebody reads your writing, whether it's a review or you're pitching a product or something, if you're going to be honest and you're going to be fair, 2 different things are going to have their good points and their bad points, but you want to emphasize the good points that you think are more important. So just make sure at the beginning of your comparative paper, your comparative paragraph, if you choose that one, that you emphasize the point that makes one of them a better choice than the other. And so your conclusions should say the same thing. You come back to the statement that although these 2 things are very similar, this certain advantage that this product has makes it a better choice for your purchase, or a better choice for it's more functional, and so that this is the one you should choose. Okay, the other three are pretty much open topics which you can choose to argue. Just remember, you do need to have a position at the beginning. You need to sort of agree or disagree with something. The topic isn't a question about do you agree. It's not a statement. It's just something like health or sports. Those are not the topics, but I'm just going to say like one word. So you have to actually take that topic, make a statement, and give a position, because I'm asking you to do that, because that's what we did in the course, right? Sometimes people are going to tell you, this is what I want you to argue. And in other cases, you're going to have the choice. And in that case, sometimes it's a matter of creativity, but sometimes it's problem solving, or sometimes you need to make an impression on somebody, so you need to come up with your own idea. I know that takes a little bit of time, but from what I've seen this semester, that's not been an issue. All of you seem to be able to come up with lots of interesting ideas. You just have to make sure that you take a position and give a reason, and then off you go, explaining, supporting, developing your arguments. And it is a timed writing exercise, so if it may be a good idea to actually go back to some of the topic choices that we did earlier in the semester from the textbook or from the outline, and choose a topic that you didn't do and write a paragraph and see how it goes. You should probably try and finish it in 30 or 40 minutes. If you can do that and keep it organized, then you'll have no problem on the exam. Remember, the exam is an hour and a half, and it's scheduled for next Friday at 10 o'clock. Thank you for all your effort, and I know the essay is a challenge, and the last ones are coming in today. The coronavirus cases continue to rise, and in Daejeon we had 21 yesterday, which is not a big number compared to a lot of places, but that is the highest number we've had in the city since the beginning, since February. So I think we all should stay home and study, wear masks, and sanitize carefully. If there are any changes with in-person exams or schedules, as soon as I know, I will let you know through the Cyber Campus, and I will post on my website. So make sure you keep yourself updated on how things go. But this is the best time to be isolated anyway, because you're supposed to be studying for exams. So be careful and take care, and I hope to see you all in good health next Friday at 10 a.m. Have a good day and good luck with all your exams.